Welcome to your complete guide to passing the EEE, the English Exit Exam. This is a lengthy video, so feel free to jump to the section that interests you by using the timestamps in the description below. However, I recommend watching the whole video if you can. Now let's get this party started. The English Exit Exam is a standardized test that all students in Quebec's English Cégeps must pass in order to graduate with a DEC, a Diploma of College Studies, in a pre-university or technical program. The exam takes place 3 times a year in May, August, and December. It's a 4-hour exam with no breaks that tests your ability to write a 700-word essay in English on a text. What you're seeing here is Booklet 3, an example of what Booklet 3 looks like. In the exam, you're given 3 booklets. First, a green booklet for your rough work, for your brainstorming or outline. Second, a white booklet, which is where you write your final essay. And finally, a yellow booklet that contains the texts that you'll be reading and analyzing and writing on. Don't write your final essay in the green booklet or you will fail. Now, you can write your essay in the green booklet, but just make sure you also write it in the white booklet because that's all the examiner's going to look at. The examiner's only going to look at the contents of the white booklet. As I said before, this is a copy of a yellow booklet. This one was distributed in August 2018, so you can expect yours to look like this pretty much. You'll notice in the instructions it says read the writing guidelines on the next page of this booklet. We're going to do that. And the second point is consider all 3 readings in this booklet and select one to analyze. I'll just say don't feel pressured in the exam to read all 3 of the readings before you choose one. I recommend just reading the first paragraph of each text and then deciding upon which to write to avoid wasting time. You might also make your decision based on whether the text is a piece of fiction or nonfiction. We're going to get into that. Here's what the next page looks like in that booklet. First thing I want to draw your attention to is that they are asking for a 750-word analytical essay, and essays of fewer than 600 words will automatically receive a failing grade. You have to write at least 600 words. A few tips: quotations count towards the total, and hyphenated words count as multiple words. So, for example, well-deserved, that counts as 2 words. The markers are strict about word count. If you write 599 words, that's a fail. Next thing I want to draw your attention to, read over the questions below. So the questions are the same every time. They ask you to A, develop a thesis statement about a main idea, B, explain how the author uses literary techniques, and C, make specific reference to the text to support your interpretation. I'm going to go over how to do that very soon. Another thing I want to draw your attention to. Notice how we have a short story, Scrabble lessons, an essay, The Elephant's Final Bow, and a short story, Bedtime Stories. There's always a mix of fiction and nonfiction. Usually 2 texts that are fiction, 1 that's nonfiction. In this case, we have Scrabble lessons, piece of fiction, Bedtime Stories, a piece of fiction, and The Elephant's Final Bow, that's a piece of nonfiction. Now, whether a text is fiction or nonfiction significantly changes the way you write about the text. And obviously, these are not going to be the exact texts that you're given. These were just the texts given in August of 2018, but it's always something different, you know. You'll notice also at the bottom of this page, there's a list of literary devices, and actually, since 2018, that list has been updated to help you, splitting the techniques and devices into those commonly used in short stories and those commonly used in essays, those commonly used in fiction and those commonly used in nonfiction. As I said, whether you choose fiction or nonfiction seriously changes the way that you will write your essay. So let's start with how to write an essay on a piece of fiction, on a short story. When it comes to writing an essay on a short story, the first question is, what do I write about? After you've read the story, what do you write about? Some students make the mistake of writing a review of the text. They're evaluating the text, like they're going to give it a score out of 10. How much did I like it? How good was it? And they might say something like, I liked the story very much. The author sure knows how to tell a good story. The characters were interesting. I'd like to share this story with my grandchildren one day. Don't do this. It's wrong. So what should you write about if not a review? Well, you need a focal point. You need an idea that resonates with you. You need a guiding star. That's how I like to put it. Something that's going to give you direction as you write your essay. First, let's imagine you're writing about this specific story, Rock Carrier's A Secret Lost in the Water. Now, this text can be found online by following the link in the description below, and I recommend reading it now and then returning to this video. It won't take you long. The story is only a few pages. As you read the story, take notes in the margin. I like to summarize each section in a few words to remind myself of the plot, but I might also underline a sentence just because I feel like it. Any kind of note is useful because the more you engage with the story, the more you'll build a connection with it, and that connection will lead to a better essay. Here are my notes. I wrote a little summary in 4 words of the first paragraph. I made a connection somewhere, and then I also just drew an emoji to express my astonishment at a part of the story. So after reading the story, choose an idea that interests you and relates to a good portion of the text. Early in your thinking process, this idea will likely take the form of an abstract noun like responsibility, courage, friendship, and so on. We're just looking for one word like that. Eventually, we want to develop this idea into a full thesis statement. So the process will look like this. Phase 1, you might have a basic thought like the story is about relationships. Phase 2, maybe you expand it a bit. The story is about father-son relationships. Phase 3, the story is about how father-son relationships must be nurtured and maintained over time, or there may be disastrous consequences. How did we get to that complex third phase? How do we move from the simple word relationships to a more complex thesis statement? Well, here's some suggestions. Simply think about the main idea. Meditate on it for a moment in relation to the story. The rest may come naturally to you. But if that doesn't work, because thoughtful meditation does not come naturally to everyone, especially when they're under pressure to write an essay for an exam, you can also trick your brain into it by using the word how. Take your simple sentence, the story is about father-son relationships, and add the word how to it. The story is about how father-son relationships, and see if including this word, how, can help you complete the sentence as it relates to the story. If that doesn't work, perhaps you haven't connected with the story yet, perhaps you've read it quickly and none of the information has truly sunk in, but whatever the case may be, you don't need a thesis statement to move ahead with your essay. So long as you have a main idea to serve as your guiding star, so long as you have a simple word like relationships, that's all you need to move ahead. You do need a simple word like that, though, because without this simple word as your guiding star, your essay is likely to drift and lack focus, veering into summary and pointless rambling. 2 guiding stars can also be problematic, so just pick one. A few things to keep in mind. This essay will be composed of 5 paragraphs, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. You're expected to write an essay of about 600 to 800 words, so the words will be distributed roughly as follows. Introduction, 75 to 100 words. Each of the body paragraphs will be 150 to 200, and the conclusion, 75 to 100. If you add up all the numbers on the lower ends there, you'll get 600, and on the upper ends, you'll get 800. Stay away from the lower ends because, as I said before, if you write under 600, you fail. There are many ways to write an analysis of a piece of fiction, so consider my method one of many possibilities. Now, once we've decided on a guiding star, how do we analyze the text? How do we write 700 words based on this little idea we have in mind? Well, allow me to introduce you to literary techniques and devices. Remember them from earlier in the booklet at the bottom of the page? We have to ensure that our analysis touches on at least 2 of these techniques. Now, literary techniques and devices get a bad reputation. They come across as stuffy and didactic, like a young man wearing a pince-nez. But literary devices are natural features of storytelling. Authors don't use them consciously, at least not good authors. Rather, literary devices simply exist like birds exist in the sky. Here's what I mean. We tell each other stories all the time. You might tell your boyfriend or girlfriend what happened in your day, and I bet you'll use some of these literary devices yourself. My English teacher was really mean to me today. That's characterization. That's the literary device characterization being used there. I'm going to Mexico in a few days. You're talking about setting. I can't stop thinking about this teddy bear from when I was a kid. That teddy bear is a symbol of some idea. Here's a list of literary devices commonly used in fiction. Alliteration, allusion, analogy, characterization, and so forth. Learning how to write effectively about each of these devices is a challenge in itself, but I'll give you examples of body paragraphs analyzing characterization and symbolism in A Secret Lost in the Water. Here's a body paragraph analyzing characterization in A Secret Lost in the Water in relation to the thesis on fathers and sons drifting apart. Now, as our first sentence for this body paragraph, we have a topic sentence. What does a topic sentence include? The supporting idea, mention of the literary device, in this case characterization, and also the main idea. The father and son are characterized as remarkably different individuals. There's our supporting idea, and this is one of the key reasons why they drift apart. Our main idea is about fathers and sons drifting apart and the disastrous consequences of that happening. Now, how do we go forward? How do we analyze characterization? You can think of characterization as a description of a person. How would you characterize the friends in your life? Do you have a friend that's neurotic? Do you have a friend that's introverted? Those are the kinds of observations we're trying to make in relation to the characters in this story. We're starting this body paragraph discussing the differing interests of these characters. We learn early in the story, for example, that the two have divergent interests. While the father is deeply connected to the land, epitomized by his skill in dowsing, the son gravitates towards academics. The son is intoxicated by the new game of spelling, while the father had little skill for it. It's important to remember someone's interests when we think about who they are as a person. So it's part of characterization. Also, what's part of characterization? Personality. Furthermore, the father comes across as a hardened individual. The father's commanding tone, exemplified in lines such as, "You have to learn to choose," and "close your eyes," sets a precedent for their interactions. His son, on the other hand, is more sensitive, more poetic in his thinking, which comes across in his chosen career path as a writer and observer of human nature. In this analysis of characterization, I've touched on the father and the son, their differing interests, their differing personalities, and I've included quotations as well to support my ideas. to show that I'm not making this up. This comes straight from the text. And these seem to me relevant lines to talk about characterization in the text. And I end this body paragraph with a concluding sentence, which is a reflection of the topic sentence. Overall, their differences in personality serve to create distance between them. That contains the supporting idea, the device, characterization, in the word personality, and it reminds the reader of my main idea, distance between father and son. Now, let's imagine this same essay, a second body paragraph analyzing symbolism as a literary device. Here's my topic sentence. Two key elements hold symbolic significance in relation to the deteriorating relationship between the father and son. Water and the alder branch. Those are the two objects that I'm going to focus on that I believe hold symbolic significance. In this topic sentence, just as before, we mention our literary device, our supporting idea, which is symbolism, the water and the alder branch, and we also have our main idea, the deteriorating relationship between the father and son. Now, how do we analyze symbolism? What do we say? Let's get into it. Water and trees hold cross-cultural symbolic significance. In various myths and religious texts, they represent all of life, or the source of life, and trees can also symbolize stability, protection, and family, hence the existence of family trees. In this little passage, I'm touching on the universality of these symbols, on what they tend to signify. Sometimes this knowledge comes to an individual quite naturally. If I were to ask you what a sunset symbolized, you would probably say an ending. If I asked you what a rose symbolizes, you would say love. That's what I'm doing here. I'm talking about the cross-cultural symbolic significance of water and the alder branch. And then I'm going to get into more specific details with examples from the story. Both symbols come together in this story in the alder branch, which is used to locate water underground. The alder branch symbolizes the means by which the life force is uncovered. It is the secret to the continuing vitality of the father-son relationship. At the end, when the earth refused to sing and the farmer takes the branch from the son's hands, this signals the death of the father-son relationship. The father's legacy and knowledge have been ignored, and the consequences are unbearably sad. The story has a sad ending, if you didn't feel it. The quotations I've chosen here to illustrate my points: the earth refused to sing and lost in the water. I'm quoting from the title of the text in my concluding sentence. Now, here's a table showing how you might tackle some other devices on your own. And I recommend you pause the video as I present the next few slides if you wish to study the material. If you want to analyze description as a literary device, then those are 3 steps to follow. In your topic sentence, make a connection between description and your main idea. Second step, include quotations from the descriptions in the text, focusing on imagery, and explain why the author meditates on this subject and how it relates to your chosen main idea. I'm not going to go through each of these. I just want to present them to you. You can pause and review them in your own time. But this is a little guide as to how to tackle each of these devices: description, symbolism, metaphors and similes, characterization, plot, foreshadowing, personification, hyperbole, and finally, irony and conflict. Try to imagine literary devices as opportunities to explore a story. Characterization and symbolism are always found in stories, so consider writing about them if you can't find any others. Now, you might be thinking, if we write about characterization for our first body paragraph and symbolism for our second, what will our third body paragraph be about? Well, it could be about another literary device like conflict or description, or it could simply expand on a general idea that connects to your main idea. After all, we only need to analyze 2 literary devices in our essay. Now that we've talked about body paragraphs, how to go about structuring them, the kinds of content we need, let's talk about how to structure an introduction to an essay on a piece of fiction. Structurally, the introduction is probably one of the more complicated paragraphs, though it is one of the shorter paragraphs, coming in at 75 to 100 words. There are many ways to write an introduction to an essay on a short story. Let's review all the different components that you might include. There's the hook, thesis statement, summary, and organizing statement. Before we get into the specifics, here's a sample introduction including 3 of the key components. First, the hook in blue. Can we afford to lose touch with our family? Is it possible that our parents and siblings are so important to our lives that we avoid or ignore them at our own peril? Then comes the thesis statement. Row Carrier's A Secret Lost in the Water is about the detrimental consequences of drifting away from your family, losing touch with the most important human connections in your life. And finally, the organizing statement. The father and son are characterized as very different people. The alder branch and water symbolize the life force of their relationship, and some key diction reveals the hidden cost of their broken relationship. Let's talk in more detail about the hook. The hook is a way to get your audience's attention. A hook may be a descriptive passage, a question, or a famous quotation. The hook must be connected to the main idea that you will explore in your essay. For an essay on the importance of family in A Secret Lost in the Water, we may write, and this is what I read earlier, the hook never refers to specific information from the story. It does not mention any characters or events. Also, a hook is optional. It's not required for a 5-paragraph analysis. Still, including a hook is a good idea because it eases your reader into your essay's subject matter. Next, we have the summary. The summary is a short overview of the story under analysis. It's usually 1 or 2 sentences that introduce the main plot points without giving away the ending. Here's a possible summary of the essay on A Secret Lost in the Water. The story centers on a father and his son. As the son gets older, they drift apart, but regardless, the father makes an attempt to pass down an important piece of knowledge. Notice how we've only written a few sentences and there are no spoilers. A summary always refers to specific information from the story. It mentions characters and key events. Like a hook, a summary is optional. You may choose not to include one because it would add too many words to an already jam-packed introduction. And that's why the introduction I showed you earlier on A Secret Lost in the Water did not have a summary, because I had spent my words on the thesis statement and the organizing statement. Remember, our introduction should be between 75 to 100 words. We don't want to pack too much information into it. We've got to be selective. The thesis statement. Now, a thesis statement identifies the topic of your essay. This is your guiding star in phase 3. It expresses the main idea as straightforwardly as possible. And here are some examples. Row Carrier's A Secret Lost in the Water is about the detrimental consequences of drifting away from your family, losing touch with the most important human connections in your life. Here's another possibility. A Secret Lost in the Water by Row Carrier focuses on the importance of passing knowledge from one generation to the next in order to ensure a fulfilled life. A thesis statement can be imagined as the moral of the story, a lesson, or if the story doesn't seem to have a moral or a lesson, a general philosophical statement or an interpretation or claim. Most importantly, your thesis is your guiding star. It focuses your essay on a central point around which your analysis can shine. It never refers to specific information from the story. It does not mention any characters or events. Also, a thesis is obligatory. You must include it in your introduction to inform your reader of the focus of your essay. Let's move on to what I think is the most complicated element of the introduction, and that's the organizing statement, which outlines the structure and three main supporting ideas of the essay. Now, it can be a single sentence or three sentences, each introducing one of the three main supporting ideas. The organizing statement can be phrased in one sentence, like this. The father and son are characterized as very different people. The older branch and water symbolize the life force of their relationship, and the encounter with the farmer at the end removes any doubt that the father-son relationship is irrecoverable. Here are my 3 points. Maybe you spotted them. And here's an example of an organizing statement in 3 sentences. First, the father and son are characterized as very different people. Second, the older branch and water symbolize the life force of their relationship. Finally, the encounter with the farmer at the end removes any doubt that the relationship is irrecoverable. The organizing statement can also focus exclusively on devices. As here, we have our 3 points, and each point is linked to a device. Characterization is our first body paragraph's device, symbolism is our second body paragraph's device, and diction is our third body paragraph's device. Diction is the choice of words of the author. Or it can contain a mix of one idea and 2 devices. Remember, we have to write on at least 2 literary devices, which leaves the third body paragraph open. So the father and son are characterized. There's our first paragraph focusing on characterization, our second on symbolism, and our third body paragraph is focused on this idea that relates to our main idea. You could omit literary devices from the organizing statement, but in that case, I would recommend mentioning them in one more sentence after the organizing statement. So check it out. Carrier focuses on the narrator's poor communication with his father during childhood. There's our first point. Their divergent interests. There's our second point. And the consequences of their lack of communication. There's our third point. These are the 3 points without mentioning any devices. But then we have a sentence afterwards. The author employs characterization and symbolism to clarify and enhance their central message. Finally, the organizing statement generally refers to specific information from the story, and it is obligatory. Here's a table to summarize some of the key points we've covered so far. Consider all the ways we could structure an introduction. Okay, taking into consideration what is optional, what is obligatory, you have all these possibilities. Students often wonder how many quotes they should include, and the answer is that quotations in your essay should make up about 15% of the total number of words in an essay. This means that an essay of 700 words will include about 100 quoted words, which is about 30 quoted words per paragraph. 30 quoted words per paragraph. Now, these 30 quoted words per paragraph could be part of 2 longish quotations of 15 words each, or 5 very short phrases of 6 words each. We've covered how to write an introduction, how to write a body paragraph, so all that's left is the conclusion, and it's the easiest part. All you need to do is repeat your thesis and organizing statements using fresh vocabulary, and then add some final ideas, perhaps a question or personal thought. Here's an example of a conclusion. In the end, rope carriers, a secret lost in the water, reminds us that losing touch with family can come at a great emotional cost. There's our thesis statement, repeated in different language. Our organizing statement, through the contrast between the father and son, there's our first point, the symbolic use of the altar branch and water, there's our second point, and carefully chosen words, that's diction, that hint at what has been lost, our third point, the story shows how painful and damaging it can be to let important relationships fade. And our final thoughts, family ties help shape who we are, and when we turn away from them, we risk losing not only our roots, but a part of ourselves. Pat yourself on the back. We did it. We got through it. That's how to write an essay on a piece of fiction, but it's not over yet. Here's how to write an essay on a piece of nonfiction. Before proceeding, I highly recommend that you watch the first part of this presentation, if you haven't already, on how to write an essay on a piece of fiction. This will give you a broader perspective and certainly help. Remember, the exam usually only includes one piece of nonfiction to choose, so learning to write on a piece of fiction will give you greater flexibility if you don't connect with the nonfiction. A few things to keep in mind. Just like the essay on a short story, this one is composed of 5 paragraphs: introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And just like the essay on a short story, you are expected to write an essay of 600 to 800 words. So roughly 75 to 100 for the introduction, and for each body paragraph, 150 to 200. And for the conclusion, like the introduction, 75 to 100. And as I said before, you add up all those lower numbers, 75 times 2 plus 150 times 3, you get 600. If you add up all the numbers on the upper range, you get 800. Okay, and that's what you're aiming for, an essay of 600 to 800 words. But write well over 600 just in case, because remember, they'll fail you if you write even 599 words. Keep in mind that there are many ways to conceptualize and write an analysis of a piece of nonfiction, so my method is just one of many possibilities. Now, there are quite a few differences between writing on a short story, fiction, and writing on an article, nonfiction. Here's a table to show you how I think about these differences. In a piece of fiction, the main idea feels hidden and needs to be found. Whereas in nonfiction, the main idea is clear and often made explicit. In fiction, there are many options when it comes to choosing a main idea. But in nonfiction, your options are limited. There are only 1 or 2 main ideas. In fiction, the thesis statement is a general abstract message that you invent. In nonfiction, the thesis statement is a detailed 2 to 3 sentence summary of the author's argument. In fiction, the organizing statement outlines your 3 supporting points. And in nonfiction, the organizing statement outlines 3 things that make the text more and or less effective. Here are 3 sample introductions to essays on various pieces of nonfiction which you can find in the description below. I recommend reading them now and then returning to this video. As you read the articles, take notes in the margin. I like to summarize each section in a few words to remind myself of the argument's main points, but I might also underline a sentence just because I feel like it. The fun thing about analyzing nonfiction is that we're usually analyzing whether an article is effective at conveying its message or not. So as you read it, think about the following questions. Are you convinced by the argument? Why or why not? What made the essay enjoyable to read? Or what made it difficult and off-putting? After reading the article, try to summarize the author's main argument in 3 sentences or less. And here's a hint. If you're struggling, look closely at the title, which usually contains part of the author's argument. Once we know the author's argument, how do we analyze the text? What do we write about in our 700-word essay? Well, allow me to once again introduce you to literary techniques and devices for nonfiction. Just like when we were analyzing a story, we have to ensure that our analysis touches on at least 2 of these techniques. When analyzing a piece of nonfiction, think of devices as the ways in which an author makes their argument more effective and engaging. So whereas with fiction, we think about how the devices reflect the storytelling, here it's more about how they make the argument more effective and engaging. Here's a list of possible ways that an author might make their argument more effective and engaging, divided into 2 sections. First, strategies that appeal to the reader's emotions. The author might choose a catchy title and begin their text with an interesting first sentence. The author might use repetition, repeating the same word again and again to make their point. The author might include anecdotes or personal stories to create a sense of relatability. The author might use vivid descriptions and imagery to evoke sensory experiences. The author might appeal to the reader's sense of nostalgia by referencing shared cultural memories. The author might write in a tone of urgency, using words like now or immediately to create excitement or fear. The author might include emotionally charged language, such as words that convey strong feelings of love, anger, or sadness. The author might make use of humor to lighten the tone and create a connection with the audience. The author might include rhetorical questions to make the reader feel personally involved in the argument. The author might employ contrast, showing a sharp difference between two ideas to elicit a strong emotional response. Now, here are some strategies that appeal to the reader's rational thinking. The author might present clear and logical arguments supported by evidence. The author might include data, statistics, or graphs to substantiate their claims. The author might structure their text with clear headings and subheadings to aid comprehension. The author might use cause and effect reasoning to explain why things happen. The author might cite expert opinions or credible sources to lend authority to their argument. The author might include definitions or explanations of key terms to ensure clarity. The author might write in a neutral, objective tone to maintain professionalism and avoid bias. The author might anticipate and address potential counterarguments to strengthen their position. Might use analogies or logical comparisons to clarify complex ideas. Might use examples or case studies to illustrate their points concretely. As mentioned before, you need to analyze at least 2 literary devices in your essay. This is another way of saying that you need to explain at least 2 ways that the author effectively or ineffectively constructs their argument. I recommend including 3, 1 for each body paragraph. The list of literary devices is provided on the next slide, and you'll notice that they naturally map onto the techniques I listed before that appeal to emotion and logic. So here's the list of literary devices commonly used in nonfiction: analogy, anecdote, appeal to authority, etc. Learning how to write effectively about each of these devices is a challenge in itself, but I'll give you examples of body paragraphs analyzing refutation of opposing views and enumeration. So here's a body paragraph. And the topic sentence is, despite taking a stance against Greta Thunberg's ideas, Moore doesn't shy away from praising Thunberg and listing her various achievements. So this is a paragraph explaining how the author acknowledges all the good things that Greta Thunberg has done, all of her achievements, while criticizing her. In this body paragraph, you'll see there are quotations taken from the text. In the opening paragraphs, we learned that Thunberg was named Swedish Woman of the Year, that she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and that she was invited to give talks at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. Moore writes, her achievements are extraordinarily impressive, and even describes Thunberg as eloquent, courageous, and precociously intelligent. It almost comes as a surprise twist when Moore begins unleashing her criticism against Thunberg in the 6th paragraph. Thunberg's rhetoric has a tendency to lapse into demagogy, simplistic, emotive, accusatory, and apocalyptic. In this portion of the body paragraph I just read, the writer is presenting material from the text. And now they're going to explain how that material makes Moore's essay more persuasive. This criticism is all the more effective for being preceded by praise. The author demonstrates their ability to see both sides of the coin, to understand the grayness of a world that too many insist is black and white. Moore knows that a surefire way to convince an audience is to acknowledge opposing views, to paint a realistic picture. In this case, there's lots to like about Thunberg, but there's also lots to criticize. So as I mentioned before, this body paragraph is an example of analyzing refutation of opposing views. This includes concession, acknowledging the good points, followed by refutation, explaining why the position is still flawed. It's a powerful strategy because it shows the author has thought critically about both sides, logos, they are fair-minded, it's ethos, and they are less likely to alienate readers who might hold the opposing view, and this connects to pathos. In general, when writing a body paragraph, I recommend explaining the effect and usefulness of a certain technique, followed by examples of this technique used in the text. This is what you'll see next. Now, this body paragraph's topic sentence is perhaps too short and lacks some detail, but it certainly makes its point. The internet is addicted to lists. The body paragraph goes on to explain how lists are engaging. You can count on YouTube videos with names like Top 10 Signs You're in a Toxic Relationship and 5 Hip New Cafes in Montreal to attract a wide audience. Why are lists so popular? They give you useful knowledge in as few words as possible, and if you're disappointed by one item on the list, there's the promise of more. The majority of internet users are looking for their quick fix, their factoid of the day, an interesting tidbit of information that will make them pause for a moment and say, huh. Now that we've got that general explanation of how this list format can be engaging, the writer moves on to present material from the text. And by the way, this body paragraph comes from an essay that is not on that article by on Greta Thunberg. It's an article. It's actually a Twitter thread all about advice to give your kids, specifically your sons. And the name of the user who created this Twitter thread is Save Your Sons. Save Your Sons made the smart decision to format their ideas as a list rather than a long, cumbersome paragraph. And this is definitely to their benefit. The headings are short and concise: fix the light bulb, everything is earned, find a fraternity, and follow each other quickly with only short explanations in between. The thread is fast-paced and punchy. Never underestimate the power of a list. So just to review, we gave an explanation of how lists are engaging in the first part of this body paragraph, and then we presented material from the text that related to our point. Now that we've seen a few body paragraphs, how do we structure an introduction to an essay on a piece of nonfiction? Well, let's get right into it. Here are some sample introductions to review. This is for the article on Greta Thunberg. Katherine Jepson Moore. I'm going to start reading the thesis statement. And remember, the thesis statement is a detailed summary of the author's argument in their article. Katherine Jepson Moore takes aim at one of the most popular activists of our time, Greta Thunberg, in her sobering article titled "When Children Protest, Adults Should Tell Them the Truth." Moore believes, among other things, that Thunberg has gotten away with voicing extremely radical opinions on the environment because she is a child. On top of this, she believes that Thunberg's ideas are pessimistic and unrealistic. What follows now is the organizing statement. Despite her criticism, Moore still acknowledges Thunberg's achievements. She also reshapes the climate debate through a contrast between dark green and light green environmentalists. Finally, Moore discusses Thunberg's history of mental illness and how this might affect Thunberg's credibility. You'll notice here our organizing statement is in 3 sentences rather than 1. And in this introduction as a whole, we only have the thesis statement and the organizing statement. Those are the 2 obligatory elements in an introduction. There's no hook and there's no summary. Here's the introduction to the essay analyzing the Twitter thread. 20 life lessons every father must teach his son is a Twitter thread from the user Save Your Sons. The list of lessons, which range from the importance of controlling your emotions to the benefits of working out at the gym, is impressive for its variety, but not for its depth. Now what follows is the organizing statement. The writer, whoever's behind the username, organizes his information into a numbered list to engage his audience, uses repetition and imperative sentences to keep his message simple and impactful, but probably owing to the medium chosen to express his ideas, Twitter, he doesn't cover any of his points in depth. I want to show you one more introduction. Ron Carpati expresses his belief in the merits of medical testing on animals. His view is based on the idea that life is cruel, the existence of no viable alternatives, and the belief that good comes out of the testing. He also states that animal rights activists do not have reasonable arguments and that there is a limit to the amount of testing that should be done. And here's the organizing statement. He puts forward several good arguments in favor of testing, which he supports with scientific and medical examples, personal experience, and comparison of his position with that of the activists. I want to show you now how all of the organizing statements I presented to you include mention of literary devices. There's contrast, credibility, ethos, a numbered list, enumeration, repetition, imperative sentences that focuses on the author's choice of words, diction, examples, personal experience, comparison, and refutation of opposing views. Like when analyzing fiction, a hook is optional, not obligatory, and your organizing statement can include two devices alongside one supporting idea that relates to the effectiveness of the text. The biggest mistake that students make is analyzing the content instead of the approach. In other words, if you read an article about e-cigarettes on the English exit exam, and you decide to analyze that article about e-cigarettes, your essay should not be focused on e-cigarettes. Rather, it should be focused on the author's approach to their argument on e-cigarettes. What does the author do to make their argument more engaging? Is the article effective at communicating its message? That's your focus. We've covered how to write the introduction and the body paragraph, so all that's left is the conclusion, and it's the easiest part. All you need to do is repeat your thesis and organizing statements using fresh vocabulary, and then add some final ideas, perhaps a question or a personal thought on the topic. And I'll repeat here what I said before. Students often wonder how many quotes they should include, and the answer is quotations should make up about 15% of the total number of words in an essay, which means an essay of 700 words will include about 100 quoted words, which is about 30 per paragraph if they're equally distributed. There's one more thing to consider. Bit of a curveball. Sometimes the nonfiction text is a personal essay. Now, this is a text that straddles the line between fiction and nonfiction because it involves a personal story, making it similar to fiction, but the story is real, based on the author's life, which makes it similar to nonfiction. I recommend you analyze a text like this as either a real-life story with a main message, so that's like analyzing fiction, or a real-life story with an argument, and then you would take the approach of analyzing nonfiction. Just remember, this story really happened, so it might be awkward to analyze characterization, for example, as these are not characters exactly, but real people. As I said, the line is blurry. Use your judgment, and if you're unsure of what to do, just pick one of the other texts. You'll be aware of the fact that it's a personal essay based on what's written on the second page of the yellow booklet. It'll be labeled there. Hey, we did it again. That's how you write an essay on a piece of nonfiction. It's not over yet, though. I have a few final points. Bear with me. How will your essay be graded? It's an important question. Your essay will be graded in 3 categories: content, organization, and expression. Now let's take a closer look at each of these categories and what the examiner is looking for. For content, what you need to do is recognize a significant main idea, analyze at least 2 literary devices in detail in relation to your main idea, analyze the main idea in good detail, and show that you have a thorough understanding of the text. As for organization, you need to write a thesis that establishes a clear direction for the essay. That guiding star needs to shine brightly. Stay focused on your thesis throughout with an organizing statement that reflects the structure of your essay. And select important quotations to support your thesis. And ensure that each paragraph works as a unified, individual unit. Finally, for the category of expression, you need to use appropriate diction. Ensure your sentences are structured for fluid reading. Avoid too many grammatical errors. And keep an eye on punctuation, spelling, and more. In this presentation, I've covered the content and organization, but not the expression. you need to score at least a C in each category in order to pass the exam. So if you score an A for content, an A for organization, and an A for expression, you're going to pass. A for content, B for organization, and B for expression, you pass. C, B, C, you pass. C, 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 you pass. Now, what about A, and then a D for expression? That's a fail. What about a C, a D, and a C? That's another fail. D, D, C, fail. A, D, B, fail. See what I mean? Now let's talk about the most common ways to fail each category. The most common way to fail in content is if you misunder the text in a significant way that totally undermines your analysis. If you don't recognize what the author's main argument is in a piece of nonfiction, or if in a piece of fiction, perhaps you misunderstand the ending and that alters your analysis completely. That misunderstanding leads to a lot of incorrect thoughts on the story. How to fail organization? The most common failure is if the essay does not meet the minimum required number of words, 600. And in expression, if your ability to express your ideas in writing is so poor that the examiner has no idea what you're trying to say, that's a fail. Now, before I end this presentation, a few final tips. Tip 1, write in pen, not pencil. And don't write with one of those erasable ink pens because the ink might rub off when the exam is in transit. Tip number 2, if you fail the exam, you can always rewrite it. Tip number 3, bring your student ID, your pencil case, a dictionary, and a light snack and bottle of water. Don't forget these things. Tip number 4, if you arrive over 30 minutes late to the exam, you may be turned away, so get to the exam on time. Tip number 5, the title of your chosen text and the first and last sentences can help you find your focus. Tip number 6, don't panic and enjoy the ride. Have faith in yourself, and if you have any questions, drop a comment below. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you, and I wish you the best of luck with your exam. You got this. That's your complete guide to passing the EEE, the English Exit Exam. If you have time, you want to study further, check out my playlist on this channel called 102, and that will have a lot of relevant material. Some videos go in depth as to how to analyze specific literary devices. I'll see you next time.